The FAA is out with a statement that it has just released regarding the certification or recertification and issuance of an airworthiness directive that would lift the grounding of 737 MAXs. This statement is the latest move by the FAA to push back against Boeing and this suggestion that the 737 MAX will be recertified in December and potentially back in service by the end of January. Without coming out and saying it explicitly in this statement from the FAA, they have essentially said that, look, we retain full control over the recertification of the MAX and the issuance of airworthiness directives that would lift the grounding of those MAXs that are already built and are grounded while they work on a fix for the plane. It ends with this statement. The FAA has not completed its review of the 737 MAX aircraft design changes and associated pilot training. The agency will not approve the aircraft to return to service until it has completed numerous rounds of rigorous testing. That's important, Brian, because they're nowhere close. There are a number of hurdles that still need to be cleared, including a certification flight, a report on that certification flight. They've got a couple of reports from committees that are set up that have public comment periods. Bottom line is this, without coming out and saying it, the FAA has essentially said this plane it's unlikely that it's going to be recertified by the end of the year.
So now we're definitely, I don't want to say definitely, but we are looking at 2020. I mean, Phil, I know you've been reporting on this as well as anybody. We keep going with this. At some point, and these planes, by the way, they're sitting there, they're aging. I assume they're being maintained. But at some point, you get to a point where owners of these planes, United and American, say, we don't want them back. We don't want them anymore.
No, I don't think we'll get to that point, Brian. I don't think we'll get to the point where they say, take them back. We're not going to fly them. I mean, they believe that these planes will be in service, and I think the FAA believes that as well. But it is clear over the last 2 weeks, you take this statement, you take the memo that the head of the FAA wrote to the person in charge of the recertification process, you take his video statement to his employees saying, we're in charge, they're not in charge. I mean, this is as clear as it can be to Boeing's management. Knock off the predictions that this plane is going to be recertified anytime soon. The FAA is adamant that it controls the process.
Phil, it's Karen. Let me ask you something. So do you think that we're not going to hear anything from Boeing about the recertification anytime soon?
Karen, I bet you what we will hear is some kind of very short statement saying, we respect the process, we respect the role of the regulators, we are working with the regulators, and we are looking forward to the plane being returned to service. I bet you that's what we'll see, because the last time they came out with a statement saying we expect it to be recertified in December, that was what, November 11th, 2 weeks ago? Since then, we've heard from the FAA 3 times, and all 3 times they've said, we make that decision, not you.
Phil, we got to let you go, but I want to ask you this quick question. Is it unfair to say we're moving backwards, but is it fair to say we're not moving very far forwards?
I think that's more accurate to say we're not moving forward as fast as Boeing would hope. That's the most accurate statement. It's not moving backwards. Look, they're going to certify this plane likely maybe by shortly after the new year, maybe by the end of January. It's not like we're looking at something that's open-ended. But at the same time, I mean, the FAA is clearly sending a message.
It certainly is. Phil LeBeau, thank you very much, buddy. Breaking news there. I mean, Guy Adami, Boeing, obviously this is an important story in itself. 2 tragic accidents. A lot of consumers are watching what happens. It also happens to be the most important stock in the Dow. I know professionals don't look at the Dow, but it's a psychological thing.
I agree 100%.
It's the highest priced stock in the Dow. It matters.
It does matter. And if you go back in March when it was a $440 stock, the level that it traded down to in a straight line off the back of these announcements was 375. And here we are again at 375. We've talked about this a number of times on this show. You sell the stock at 375. That's where it's failed a number of times, and it looks like it's going to fail again. What the FAA is saying is basically, no, Boeing, you don't tell us what our job is. We'll tell you when these planes are ready.
And that's of course they have to say this. And of course they're under the microscope right now. There's nothing different than what I'm hearing right now. The company, Boeing themselves came out November 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere in there and said there's 5 conditions that we have to satisfy. And 4 of them we're not even there on, including training that Phil talked about, which I think is probably the one with the longest tail on it of uncertainty. So I don't think there's any new news here. I mean, I think ultimately the company is being very conservative. The street has had some ability to begin to model 2020 deliveries for 2020 that begin in the first quarter.
The stock is still up 15%.
Nothing new has happened.
Stock is still up 15% this year. Still up 15. Are you surprised by that, Tim?
No, I'm not. And I'm long the stock. So I'm certainly speaking from a perspective. I actually feel pretty comfortable with the process here, even despite the tragedy. I think no one has expectations they are going to come to market faster than expected.
Okay, good stuff. And breaking news there from Phil LeBeau and Boeing.